a lovely lady. Her name is Karen Kay, and she's also known as AKA the Fairy Lady. Our guest tonight is the magical, hardworking, and omniscient Karen Kay. She is a former BBC News editor who founded her own international fairy magazine called Fae, F-A-E. Her fairy journey began in her grandmother's garden, where she used to make fairy perfume as a young girl. Karen is also related to the renowned fairy poet Walter De La Mare. If you wish to check out her website, please go to www.karenk.co.uk. If you also sign up to her newsletter at www.karenk.com, you will have the opportunity to win a free fairy door meditation. And I'm not quite sure what that is, but I'm hoping, Karen, are you there?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We can. Can you hear us?
I can, yeah. Hi.
Excellent. So, Karen, could you tell us a little bit more about the fairy door meditation? It sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's basically, hello everybody, and thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. The fairy door meditation is like an introduction. It's a mini meditation where you go through a fairy door and you have an experience there. I don't want to give too much away because it's part of the journey is the unexpected, and that's what I always say with fairies, is always expect the unexpected. There'll be no nasty shocks or anything. It's a very pleasant, relaxing meditation. It's for people who haven't done it before and people that have done it before, so it's for everybody. It's a very kind of neutral, gentle introduction into fairies.
Wonderful. Well, Sheila, I don't know about you, but I think we should book a double session. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Yes, I think when you're up in October, we'll sync it up with Karen. Can we do it over Skype? Is that possible?
Anything's possible.
Of course it is. We'll manifest it. That's what we're all about on this show, isn't it, Sheila? Manifesting things.
Absolutely love it. Yes, and love fairies.
Now, if any of our listeners would like to see Karen in person and they are in the UK, she will be manifesting a couple of fairy workshops shortly in the UK. Plus her next fairy ball and fairy fair are going to be in Glastonbury on the 20th and the 21st of October. And I'm so excited about this. Next year, I'm planning on doing a bit of traveling. So I'm going to try and get my dates all in a line so I can do both the US and the UK. So that will be wonderful. Now, Karen, do you have any questions for us before we kick into the interview? Or Sheila, do you have any questions for Karen before we kick off?
No, I'm just waiting with bated breath.
Yeah, I'm it's very early not very early. It is for me because I'm a night owl, but I know it's nighttime where you are. It's quite early here in the UK for me, so I'm open to chatting, and I love talking about fairies. So yeah, I'm really ready, and I don't have any specific questions for you guys, but yeah, I'm really happy to chat with you.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Well, I have to say, Karen, with the magazine, I did actually have I've got two friends. One who has I think you call it the green thumb. She can make a garden out of anything, and she turned her house into the most amazing place. The best garden I think I've ever seen over a 7-year period. She was a neighbour at the time. And she found when she had finished her garden after 7 years of hard work, and it was, as I said, it was a magical place. She was visited by Salvador, who was a fairy, and she wrote, I think, 4 different articles for the magazine, over 4 issues on Salvador, and then eventually she met Queenie, or Queen Mab. Is that the correct terminology?
That's one of the queens, yeah, Queen Mab, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll have to send you through those stories. It was just an amazing.
I'd love to read them. I'd love to read those. They sound fascinating.
Oh, they are. So that's kind of my background in fairies. And I have to say, full disclosure, fairies have always been that line too far for me. I'm a ufologist. I've had contact experiences. I've been on, and been very heavily into paranormal investigation, so I've seen a little bit of high strangeness as well. But I don't know, fairies were always that line that I couldn't get past until, and Sheila will back me up on this. A couple of years ago, I have a good friend called Kay, who's the lady I was talking to you about on email the other day.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever I see her, you and I always seem to speak to her just before I talk to you, and it throws me with your name every time. But she's she's always been able to take photographs and get the globes or the orbs in them, mm-hmm. you know, at certain events. And so I've always called her the orb whisperer. But about 2 or 3 years ago, she started to actually capture fairies in her photos as well. And I mean, I'll have to send you a few of these as well because they are absolutely amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I'm always interested in seeing photographic evidence of fairies because they don't often allow themselves to be captured on camera. So, yeah, it's always good to see it. And obviously, you know, they do appear as orbs, they appear as points of light, but I'm so excited to see the pictures, actually. I'd love to see those.
Well, that was me. I was completely like, I don't believe in fairies. In fact, I used to refer to them quite, you know, like with another word, I used to call them effing fairies. You know, I don't believe in that. And then my friend brought the photos over and laid them on a table, and I had them, because with the magazine, of course, I've got people that verify everything before it goes in, and mm-hmm. I sent them down to New Zealand, and my little gentleman down there who checks everything rang me up very upset because he was sure that they were going to be fake, and he said, I can't find anything wrong with these. But he could not actually say to me they were real, because then he would actually have to admit it was a fairy in the photo. So he was really quite miffed. I've never seen anyone so miffed about not being able to find it. And he's been able to debunk everything from paranormal to ufology photos, and he couldn't debunk the fairy photos. So I will send them to you.
Oh yeah, that would be really cool. I'd love to see those. Perhaps, well, we'll have a look at them first, and I'm already thinking, I'd love to put them in my fairy magazine. So, but we'll see. We'll see.
I'll definitely connect you then. So
thank you.
With Kaz as well, because you know, you have a look at her work, and if you like it, she might end up being a really good writer for you. You know?
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I'd love to have that connection.
So anyway, let's kick off. So we've got to start with the ultimate question. Karen, do you believe in fairies?
Let me think about this. Yes, unequivocally. That's a long word for this morning or this evening. Yes, I do believe in fairies. And actually, no, I don't believe in fairies. I know that fairies exist because belief implies an element of doubt. But I definitely do know that they exist.
So you would call that a personal truth?
Yes. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. I have that with too. As I said, I've had contact experiences. And I've always said about my contact experiences, I don't expect other people to believe me, to be honest, until they have their own experiences. Because I think until you have a personal truth moment with some type of high strangeness, you really can't make that assumption. You can't really, it's a bridge too far for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people associate it with childish, you know, like fairy tales and things like this. But you know what? You don't have to have the experience to believe, because a lot of people say, seeing is believing, but actually believing is seeing as well. If you turn that around, when you have that belief, you're actually more likely to see. And I know people can say, that's because your mind wants to. But my fairy experiences where I've seen them, I haven't even been thinking about them, and it's happened in quite random situations. So I'm really used to it now. But equally, I, like you say with your experiences, I don't have to prove it to anybody. I'm not trying to prove it to anybody. I'm just living my life. I work on a daily basis with the fairies, and you know, I think I'm pretty sound. I'm not too bonkers, and you know, you know, people accept that. I get lots and lots of people contacting me, sharing their own experiences, and for some reason, I'm not sure what it is, but people feel shy, embarrassed, they don't want to come forward, but they contact me and they say, oh, at last somebody who believes in fairies, somebody who's connecting with them, and then they share their stories. So I know for a fact there are a lot of people, more than who, I don't know how to say this, a lot more people than you would think who actually do have that connection and have their own encounters with fairies. So it's really quite interesting.
I find if I'm at a dinner table with a group of people and I'm brave enough at some point to say I've had a contact experience and but not anything else, I'll find by the end of the night at least half the table has pulled me to one side and told me their story. Is that the same with fairies?
It is in a way, yeah. I've had UFO experiences and contact as well. I'm not going to talk about it now because it's a different subject, but I've had that, and there are only very few people that I can talk to that, about that, because it's another, for me, it's like that's something else. It's like it's a bit way out there. Whereas for you, it's like fairies, like, oh no, but
exactly, yeah.
For me, fairies are they're a part of life. There are so many stories through history, and actually in modern history as well. Like, have you ever heard of Findhorn in Scotland?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So that's a huge. I've never physically been there, but I read a book many years ago called The Magic of Findhorn, and in that book it explains how when they first went there, it was dust, it was, the ground was not fertile, it was pretty much like desert, and they connected with the spirits of the land, the fairies, the elementals, the devas, whatever you want to call them. They connected with those earth energy beings, and the vegetables and the plants and the flowers that they grew there were bigger than you would get, and they didn't use any growth stuff or anything. It was just purely growing on sand, working in harmony with the elementals. So there are some kind of, what I would say, factual examples of humanity working in harmony with fairies, and every single thing that grows, there will be a fairy guardian, a nature angel, an elemental, whatever name or label you want to put onto it, helping. It's a bit like the life force. It is the life force. So we have a life force. Without our life force, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't do anything, depending on what your belief is in how we are as humans. And it's similar for fairies and plants. So a plant, the fairy is almost like the life force of a plant. That's in very primitive terms.
No, I actually refer to my experiences as, I don't usually call them ETs, I call them energy entities, because that's what
energy entities, did you say?
Yeah, that's how I refer to them, because
I
have, when I've been on paranormal investigations and when I've actually had contact, I've felt this energy, and it feels the same to me. So I also have a theory which no one agrees with me, Karen, so don't feel the need to try and help here. I've got this theory that all of the high strangeness is basically all this same energy, that based on our upbringing and our experiences and the religion that we're raised in, like if you're a Catholic person and you're from a very devout family, I think you're more likely to see an angelic form. But if you're like me, I was actually raised Catholic, but I didn't really do much with it after 19. So I've really been more of an agnostic. I believe there's some great power out there, but I'm not sure if it's like a god, a man with a long white beard. So basically, that's why I think I've been able to have contact with more creature-likes, like a grey and a mantis and a tall white, so a variety of different kind of ETs, whereas other people, like my friend Rick, who's been into sci-fi and like the paranormal and ghostly thrillers, he has had a lot of energy entities in the form of ghosts. And so my personal theory is that what we're all contacting is this energy, but based on how we manifest it in the form that is most likely for us to be receptive to. But as I said, you don't have to agree with me on that, Karen. That's just how I kind of reason the world.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, actually. And there is something that I say about fairies as well, is that, like, people say, oh, do they have wings? And that, you know, the typical kind of depiction of what fairies are based on Victorian times. And sometimes, yeah, they do. And sometimes they don't. They will show themselves to you, if they want to, in a way that will be acceptable and recognizable to you. So that does tie in a little bit with what you're saying. Ultimately, everything is energy, everything, and it's clothed in different ways and will show itself to you in different ways, in a way that resonates with you. And if you're putting out there, like, you know, I want to see an angel, and then perhaps you are more likely to see an angel. And if you say, I want to see a fairy, perhaps you're more likely to see a fairy. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that, you know, how people see things, but there is an element of your vibration will attract the same kind of similar vibration, in the sense of like attracts like. So if you have that little kind of fairy shape space in your aura, then perhaps a fairy will appear to fill it, perhaps.
It's interesting that you mentioned Findhorn before. I don't know if you're aware of this, but where I am at the moment, where I'm living in Brisbane, we actually have a small community of ex-Findhorn people.
Oh, no, I had no idea about that. Oh, that's interesting. So what do they do then? What are they doing there?
Well, most of them are actually passed on.
Oh, sorry, I'm not laughing. Bless their souls. Bless their souls. I'm not laughing at that. I'm just...
But I actually went on a spiritual road trip about almost 2 years ago with a lady called Tess, who was from Findhorn, and so we're on the road going to all these different spiritual landmarks around New South Wales and Queensland in Australia, and I'd hear all the Findhorn stories, and she would tell me all about the gentleman you've heard of Nexus Magazine.
Yes, I have. I'm not sure if I've seen it, but I've certainly heard of it.
Well, the founder of that, the father, not current Duncan Rose, but his father was an original, one of the co-founders of Findhorn.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting.
Well, that's what Tess told me, so maybe I shouldn't have said that until checking. But that's what I was kind of informed. And but no, it does sound like it was quite a magical place. Sadly, Tess isn't very well, so she's otherwise I'd put you in contact with her too, because you might be able to get some original stories. So I can't, but I remember as we were like driving around, and she just popped up with a little bit, and she said exactly what you said before, that basically everything just came out of the earth. It was a magical place, you know, and so I think you're right. Have you actually been up to Findhorn?
No, I've never been there. I've only read the book. It is one of my places that I'd like to go to. It's definitely on the list. I think because I'm in the UK, anything that's in the UK, it's like you can have friends that live around the corner and you don't see them for years, but you can take a plane and travel across the other side of the world. So I do need to go there. I don't like the term bucket list. I don't like that term. I will say it's on one of my list of places that I'd really like to see in my lifetime.
So are you based in Cornwall?
I am, right down the bottom at the ends of the earth, that little bit that at the bottom of the UK, yeah.
So are you anywhere near Redroof?
Yeah, I am actually. Probably about 20-25 minutes away, depending on the traffic, yeah.
That's where my mum's from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, small world, isn't it? I was born in Southampton. My brother was born in Portsmouth. So yeah, that's where I actually started my life, down that area. So.
Oh gosh, so you are English?
Yes. I came. We emigrated in when I was about 13.
Oh wow. Okay, you've got a very strong accent, so you've picked up the accent.
Oh yes, I think if you go through the school system, it disappears. My brother, who is 5 years older, he still sounds like he's from the West End or East End or whichever one.
Oh, that's amazing to know. Yeah, have you heard of Cambrai, a place called Cambrai?
Yes.
So I went there, apparently, I went there the other day, so I know that it's there, but I didn't know this. I've lived in Cornwall for many, many years. I'm originally from London, but I moved to Cornwall, I think, just in my early 20s. And I'd never been to this place, but there's a place called Cambrai Castle, and it's actually a restaurant. They've turned it into a restaurant. It's so magical there. Like, it is so magical there, and it's literally like perched on these boulders, and you feel like, gosh, is it going to fall off the top of the cliff? But it's so lovely. You just reminded me of that. I only went there last week for the first time, so you must go there if you come back to the UK again.
Yes, I think I went there before it was a restaurant, and I must have been like 7 or 8, or so. Although when you're a 7 or 8 and you're being dragged around to all the old family homes, you know, it
doesn't hold the same charm or intrigue, does it really?
No, I'd like to do it. I did come back in 2006, and I went to Stonehenge and checked out all the Daggy sheep. So I had no idea there'd be, you know, for some reason I just didn't imagine there'd be so many sheep around it. It was quite funny. So, and they weren't particularly attractive, were sheep. So.
I haven't seen sheep there. I've only been a couple of times. I don't know if they still have them there or not, or whether they were just on a different field when I went there. But that's funny.
It was. There was. I'm not joking. There was about 100 there that day. I was just thinking, my God, what is this normal?
It was on that day.
It was meant to be. So,
definitely.
We better keep going, or we'll never get this done, will we?
We digress.
Would you mind giving us a little overview or brief overview of fairy belief in the UK?
Okay, so obviously I can't speak for everybody in the UK, but I can speak from my own experience and my own perspective. So what I've been involved in it's like a fairy uprising of humans who feel that they are part fairy or have a very close connection with fairy, and like we feel like we've got fairy blood in us, and that isn't so bizarre as it might sound, because if, for example, I don't want to digress too much, it's so easy when you're talking about fairy to just go off in lots of different tangents, but I'll just briefly summarize this. So for instance, in Ireland, you would, and in other places actually in the UK and probably all around the world, you would hear tales of the little folk, the little people, who were actual physical people who then kind of became the fairy folk, if you like. So some of us believe that we still have those genes, the DNA of that within us, which is why we have this strong connection to nature and feel like a kinship with the fairies, because we believe that we are that, or we're part human, part fairy, because the fairies bred with the humans as well. So there's another angle to look at it. So anyway, there's this kind of, I don't want to say subculture, there's a fairy culture in the UK that is growing. I organised my first kind of proper fairy event back in 2006, and I didn't know if anybody was going to come to that event. At the time, I just felt very isolated in my own beliefs, if you like, and I didn't feel that anybody really understood, or people would laugh, or there wasn't anyone else like me. And I set up this event and it literally sold out, and lots of people came out of the woodwork, out from the hills, from wherever they were, and they all pretty much said the same thing. I thought I was the only one. I had no idea there were others like me. You know, like when you're meeting a lot of people who you don't have to explain anything, you just get each other, you know what the deal is, kind of thing. And from that, this surge, it's just grown, and it's continually growing. And I did the first fairy festival in the UK in 2007. Like, I mean, a proper festival. Lots of events call themselves festivals, but they're actually indoor events. They don't have camping and stuff. So I did a proper festival with outdoor camping, stages, this sort of thing. And everyone came. And that was pretty much the only one. There might be one or two other little ones for children going on, but nothing like the one that I was doing. And now there are loads of them. Like, it's just taking over, and they're popular events, and they're attracting people, using the word the mainstream, kind of normal people who want to go. Usually it's because their children like dressing up as fairies, but that's an entry point. So it doesn't matter to me. You know, I'm not bothered if people come because they like Disney's Tinkerbell, or because they want to know more about the goblins, or whatever it is, as long as they're coming in. Because for me, when you connect with fairies, it's about connecting with the environment, and the environment is so important for humanity's survival. So it's, some people think, yeah, fairies are twee and they're all this and that, and there is that element to it, but there's actually a very serious aspect to fairies, and that is the survival of humanity, which is a pretty powerful thing to say. I didn't know I was going to say that till I said it, but it's true.
Must have been meant to be said. So how old were you when you had your first experience with the Fae then? And was this the experience that kind of guided you down this path?
Well, I was a young girl when I had my first experience, probably around the age of 4 or 5 years old. Obviously, it was a very, very long time ago, but actually the memories... the memories from that time are very, very strong. They've stayed with me, which I'm really grateful for, because they were really precious. And I used to spend a lot of time with my grandmother. She lived in South London and had a beautiful garden, and she loved flowers and roses particularly. She loved roses, the natural roses. And I just remember being out in the garden with her a lot, and it always seemed to be sunny, or perhaps we just never went out there when it was raining. But my memories are being in the garden in the sunshine, and then gathering rose petals as they were falling from the plant, and I would gather them up and I would put them in a little pot. I can't remember what I put them in, but I used to create fairy perfume for the flower fairies. That was my little offering. So I formed my connection with fairies at that young age. It hasn't been a constant thing, because when I got into my late teens, I kind of didn't want to know them, in a way that I didn't think they were cool and they weren't hip, and I was really, cared about the latest fashions and all this sort of stuff, and to believe in fairies, just I didn't think was very cool at the time. But they still did not go away. So just because I was like, no, you're not cool, you're not making me look cool, but they stayed. And so I believe that they have steered the direction, all the twists and turns, and opened lots of magical fairy doors in my life that have led me to the position that I'm in now. And I'm really grateful for that, and I can't imagine it being any other way.
I'm a big believer in that synchronicity to connection and relationships too. Pretty much everybody I interview on the magazine, once I've spoken to them for a little bit, there's a connection somewhere. So it's So I believe that you're meant to have certain people in your life or to learn something from a certain person as you go. And I think there is that guide. A lot of people refer to them as a spirit guide or something, but in your case, it's if you do have the Fae blood, it probably is a fairy.
Yeah.
Fae or fairy?
Either really. My magazine is called Fae, Fae, and that stands for fairies and enchantment. So, but you know, lots of people spell it in different ways. You can do the FAE, which is more connected with the Celtic lands and the association there, but equally a lot of the time I use this common spelling of fairy. Some people say that the Disney-esque spelling of fairy, Fairy, and that kind of stems from the fair folk, the fairy folk. There's lots of reasons to use different words, and ultimately they don't care what they're called as long as it's respectful. And it's whatever you feel comfortable with. So I will often flip between the various spellings of fairy depending on my mood at any given moment. But usually, you know, when I'm kind of doing public work, I will use the standard commonly used fairy spelling because people immediately understand what that is. So they know if I say I'm Karen Kay the fairy lady, then they'll say, oh yeah, we know what that is. They understand it. So yeah, if I say fae, then some people will understand that who are more into it, but people that aren't into it might not understand what that is.
No, I've always referred to them as the fae.
Yeah.
And but then that might be, I've got quite a lot of Irish heritage on my mum's side. So,
right. Yeah.
That way. And of course, we, unlike the Welsh, we like our vowels. Now, would you mind sharing with us how you work with the fairy energy and how tactile is it? Do you actually feel something when you manipulate it?
Okay, so I do feel when I work and connect with fairy energy, with the fairies, I do physically feel something, and the way I describe it is there's a few different elements and some new things that have come in recently, which I'll share after I've described the feeling. But the feeling that I get is like a fizzy electric feeling. So it's like not in a painful way, in a lovely way. So it's like fizzy champagne. You know, when you get lots of like do you call them goosebumps, or you know, when you get all tingles on your body and stuff like that. So it feels like that, but inside as well, and it's very fizzy. So I kind of can feel when they're around. And the different types of fairies, I mean, I tend to connect with a certain type of fairy, so I'm familiar with their energy. It's almost like that's their calling card. More recently, over the last few months, I get a scent, and I know people associate this with you know, when people pass over and then maybe they'll get the scent of lavender, and that's the perfume that their grandmother used to wear, or something like this. I get smell of toffee apples and candy floss.
Wow, that's a good smell.
Oh, honestly, and it's there's no doubt that it's there, and I'll be there, and I could be anywhere, like in the middle of the city, in a supermarket, or not near the toffee apple stall, of course, but you know, I could be anywhere. In fact, I was in my car yesterday and I suddenly got this, it just filled with toffee apples, and I thought, where is that coming from? And I always do it every time, like, where's it coming from? And then I realize what it is. And I've been with other people and said, can you smell that? Can you smell those toffee apples? And they're like, no, I can't smell anything. So I feel like it's just there for me. It's like another calling card of the fairies, and it's so lovely. I mean, I love the smell of toffee apples. I haven't had them for years. I don't think since I was a young child, but it's a really lovely smell, and it's been in all seasons. So you could say, oh, well, it's bonfire night, you know, there's the smell of toffee apples, but I have it all the time, not all the time, but in different seasons. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's another way they can let you know that they're there by certain smells, and that is not a smell that I would ever have thought of or associated with them. So it's really interesting as my relationship with them is evolving. They're kind of showing me more things, and you do have to be receptive and open-minded, because, like, you know, you said at the beginning of the show, not everybody is open to that. People see it as a bit kooky, and it's like, oh, fairies, you know, and it's such a shame that they have this reputation, which I've kind of set it as my own mission to kind of change that, to show people that actually fairies are just as valid as other beings that people want to connect with, and if not more so, as I keep kind of saying, without wanting to sound like a broken record, you know, humanity, the survival of humanity depends on our connection with nature, and fairies are a part of nature, so there's no separation. So you know, and to connect with them, we can just be in a space, we can be in our apartments, in our homes, or ideally be outside in nature. Find a tree that you like, find a stream that you want to, you know, somewhere where you feel comfortable, and just be in that space and remain. I don't want to say meditate, because that can also put people off, but some people go into kind of what you'd call a natural state of meditation, which is what I did for years before I even knew what meditation was. And it's just where you can just be in a space, you can be wherever you are, and just be receptive and sensitive and aware of what's going on around you. And then in your mind, you could say something like, fairies, I'm here. If you want to connect with me, then I'm open to that connection and communication. And it can take a while to build up that relationship with the fairies. They're quite cautious of man, of humanity, because the way humanity treats the environment, not everybody, of course, but, you know, some people hack down rainforests and just chop down trees whenever they want and spray pesticides everywhere. And that is abhorrent to fairies, basically, because their energy, and they're intrinsically connected with the plants and the flowers and the trees. So when people do things to them and destroy them, then it is offensive to the fairies. So they do take a back seat, and they will come forward as they learn your energy, and they'll kind of scan your energy, and it can be very subtle. That when you're connecting with them, it can be very, very subtle. So you do have to be quite clear-headed and receptive. And obviously, fairies do work with the imagination, but you need to be mindful that, you know, you're not creating that experience from your own mind, and that you really are having that experience. And again, that is something that just comes with practice, but anyone can do it. And if you're coming to it from a pure place, like in your heart, and do your best to take out the chatter of the mind and your beliefs or disbeliefs, and try and get yourself into that open space, then that's the starting place of connecting with fairies.
Yes, no, it's interesting that you were talking about the different senses being triggered. I've noticed over the last couple of months, I'm starting to get the audio thing happening for me. So I'll just be sitting down, and suddenly I'll get like this very powerful kind of sound hit my ear, and no one else can hear it, but it's like a tone, and I'll just know that something's around. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And,
I totally know what you mean. I get that as well. I used to get that a lot.
So that's only really kind of like, I used to get it a little bit, but the last six weeks it's been almost constant. Like, it's quite invasive some days. So, and I actually went and got my ears checked just in case. I'm sure maybe something was a bit off, but no, I'm fine. In fact, my hearing is excellent, I'm told.
That's so funny. Sorry to interject what you said, because when I was seeing fairies too much, like too many lights, I went and got my eyes checked out as well. Because I thought actually that, you know, maybe it's an eye problem that I've got, that I'm seeing these flashing lights everywhere, but my eyes were fine too, and they are fine. So I know what I'm seeing is fairies, and I can tell the difference as well between fairies and angelic presence as well, which has come from experience as well.
Wow, you've had quite a rounding, haven't you? It sounds like you've had contact with a number of different areas, not only the angelic, but also fairy as well as ufology. I mean, you've kind of traversed a few different areas, and as I said, like at the very beginning, I don't believe there are different areas. I think it's all the same kind of entity, energy.
Yeah.
Personally, so I'm not surprised at all. In fact, I get rather upset with paranormal people, even though they're the most fun to go and get drunk with, Karen, if you ever come across that field. The ufologists take themselves far too seriously, let me just state that. The paranormal people are great to party with, but they're also a little arrogant because they poo-poo everybody else, the paranormal. So, but they are the most fun to drink with.
Well, you haven't been to a fairy party, so I will challenge you on that one. Fairies know how to party, I tell you.
Well, that sounds perfect. So look, the next question I kind of just want to know for me, really, do you ever go out looking for the fae? And have you come up with, like, I even came up with an acronym for you, the FIZ, a Fairy Investigation Squad.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, have you ever done that? Have you ever gone on an investigation in search of fae?
Okay, so in general, no, but actually, yes. My partner and I did that once because he's very supportive in my work, and he said, you know, okay, so midsummer's the time when we go and see fair, you know, you're supposed to go fairy spotting and, you know, look at according to all the books and everything. So we set off one, I think it was like as the sun was going down on Midsummer's Day. It was quite a number of years ago, and we went into a field with the intention of fairy spotting. And then as the sun was starting to set, it was still light, all of these tiny little fairies just flew up, and we both saw it with our own eyes, and we both just stood there because we didn't really expect to be seeing them, and we're like, are they insects? But we hadn't seen anything like that before. So I was like, do you believe now? And he's like, yeah. And then after this time faded, the mind comes in and it's like, oh, but was it? And, you know, it gets questioned, whereas I never question it. And I don't go out on fairy investigations, you know, like that. But that's quite a good idea. That might be quite a fun thing to do.
You could add it to, like, if you were doing a weekend conference, or maybe not a conference, a festival, you could have it as a nighttime event, you know? Yeah,
fairy spotting. Yeah, definitely. I love the idea of that.
So obviously there are many kinds of fae out there. Would you mind describing to our listeners just a few of the more prominent groupings?
Yeah, okay. And immediately as you said that, gnomes have popped into my mind.
I love gnomes. I can't believe I'm telling you this. I have at least 30 gnomes in my garden. I have a gnome fetish.
Gnomes or actual gnome energy?
No, actual, like, gnome, you know, that are painted.
Figurines, yeah. Well, that, you know what? I won't, again, it's so easy to digress in this, but when you have gnome figurines or gnome statues in your garden, that is a big sign. It's like a welcome sign to the fairies and the gnomes to say, you are welcome here, I acknowledge you. So on some level, by having those, you are actually welcoming them, inviting them into your garden. So gnomes are very, very earthy. They're manifestors, they're hard workers, and they will be attracted to people who have those same kind of qualities. So, or if you need to enhance those qualities within yourself, then call on the gnomes, because they will help. They're very hardworking. They're very, very, very earthbound. So they wouldn't really fly as the other fairies would with wings. They're working fairies. So they reside in very close to the earth, around roots of trees, around trees, in dark bushes and things like this. So yeah, gnomes are great to work with. They're good manifestors as well. If you ever need to manifest something in your life, as long as it's not for selfish reasons, you know, it might be something that you need on a practical level. They're very practical beings. And sometimes you might need money for practical purposes. So you can always ask. They won't always help, and because they will feel your intention and your motives behind your requests, that you can work with them energetically. And the way to welcome them into your life is to put statues in your garden. So you're halfway there, Sharon.
Well, it's actually quite a funny story. I just fell in love. I've always had gnomes in my, my front door or my back door and stuff like that. I just grew up with them as a kid. And then we started giving them, I have two daughters. We started actually, whoever's birthday it was, got a gnome, and we all, it got to the point where they started getting bigger and bigger and bigger until the last birthday we had to stop doing it because we had this, it's almost 5 foot tall gnome.
Oh wow, I want one.
I've got to show you, I'll take a photo of it. It's just hilarious, but it was so, we couldn't even wrap the sucker. It was so big. It was. So we've moved on to meerkats now.
That is an interesting transition.
Yeah, we tried pug dogs, but it just didn't have the same feel. And I must admit, I actually just bought another couple of gnomes like 2 days ago.
Yeah, I was going to say the gnomes won't go away for long.
No, they're back, and it's quite funny.
There's some more variety of the gnome statues as well. There's some really fun ones. Like I've got a golden gnome. I've got a mermaid gnome, half mermaid. I've got a meditating gnome. I've got a Spock, Dr. Spock from Star Trek gnome. I've got loads of crazy gnomes. I love them so much. I really love working with gnome energy, and they help me to work as well. They really will encourage you. So that's just one type of, being from fairyland, a gnome. And then, oh gosh, what have you got? In Cornwall, for example, they're still a kind of gnome. Actually, I can't get away from the gnomes. Yeah. Is the knockers. They're called the knockers, Knockers. And they are fairies, like gnome type creatures that live in the mines, and there are not as many of them nowadays because the mines aren't actually actively used now as much as they were. So for the tin mines, and they would work very closely with the miners, and if there was danger or something that wasn't quite right, they would knock, hence their name, the knockers. So but they are a form of gnome as well. They live underground and are associated with mining, and they're very specific to Cornwall. I think other mining areas would have them as well, but they probably have different names. And then there are the Moormen, and these are specifically associated to the area of Cornwall, but again I think you'd find them anywhere, and they would be fairies of the moors that would be protectors of the animals, the cattle, the horses, the wild ponies, this sort of thing, the sheep. So they're specifically there for the animals, and they're described as very tall, thin, and they're called more men, but you would get female versions as well. And they are protectors of animals. So if if you've got a poorly pet or something, take them to the vet, of course, but you can also work with the more men and the more women to bring extra fairy healing energy to help to heal your pet. So that's something to, not a lot of people know about those. And you've got sylphs, SYLPHS, who are fairies. They would be, when you think of a fairy, or when most people think of a fairy, they say, oh, a little gossamer fairy with wings and blah blah blah, and that's how a kind of sylph would manifest very often. And they are fairies of the air, so they help to purify the air. They're present in all types of weather. You can call on them if you need to influence the weather, which I don't really recommend, but maybe you're going out, you've got plans to go out for a nice picnic and you'd like it to stay nice, then you can ask them. They don't always fulfill wishes and requests, but sometimes they do. They can be quite nice. And I work with them a lot with our festival, and more often than not, over the last 3 years, I think we've had excellent weather, and we get a little bit of rain on the last day, and that's fine because that's when everyone's going. So so you can work with them, and they're very sensitive to frequencies like all the Wi-Fi, mobile phones, telephone masts. It's not pleasant for them, so that can actually push them away. So when you are trying to connect with them, if you do want to, then I would always say, switch off your mobile phone, put it into airplane mode or something like this, and just be mindful of that, because they are very sensitive to those signals and frequencies.
Yes, no. Well, okay, so what would be like the strangest story you've ever heard that might be related to the Fae? Something that maybe we haven't heard before about them.
Oh gosh, well I don't know what you would have heard or what you wouldn't have heard, but one of the interesting stories that has come up recently is about Reverend Kirk. Have you heard of him? He was from Scotland, and he was a pastor, a man of the cloth, if you like, and he did lots of research on fairies and the little folk. And when he did it was kind of shunned upon in those days, especially from a religious point of view, because fairies have been kind of demonized by a lot of religions.
They have.
So for him to actually go out and seek that contact, and then the story goes that he was taken away. He was abducted by the fairies, and I don't have the full. I wish I'd had it in front of me, but it's easy to research if it's easy to Google. But basically, he was taken away, abducted by the fairies, and put in a tree. His soul was put in a tree, apparently. He was found dead. His physical body was found dead, but actually his soul's still alive. And it's quite interesting.
For a couple of minutes.
Okay, guys, we're just coming up to a break, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes or so. So you're with the last Thursday of the month and the Oddities E-Club.
freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Join Revolution Radio every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Studio B for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. You know, the shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out. Not me. Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it looks like we had a really short break that time, guys. Sorry, I said 5 minutes and it hasn't been 5 minutes. So you with Sheila Kennedy, and welcome to the 1% and the last Thursday of the month, Oddities OeC Magazine. And this evening our time in Australia, this morning for our lovely guest Karen Kay, also known as the Fairy Lady, it's morning in the UK. And we're going to be coming right back. So Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we are the number one 100% listener-supported radio station, bringing tonight's show back to you. So welcome back, Sharon. Welcome back, Karen. And
hello.
Enjoying this. Thank you.
So, Karen, do you see the original fairy tales as kind of historical documents that should be revered, akin to, say, a Christian Bible?
That's interesting. That's a really it's kind of thrown me, that question. I think it's because you said the Bible in there as well. So I've never associated. I think with fairy tales there are usually very strong messages, very strong lessons. If you look beyond the actual story and look at the essence of what it's saying,
it's like parable.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I would never, I couldn't with my hand on my heart say, oh, they should be revered like a Bible or anything like that. I think you can get some very powerful life lessons from fairy tales when you really look into them. I get sent lots of books as the editor of the fairy magazine, as Fae Magazine, I get sent a lot of books, and I have got some that I haven't got round to reading yet that talk exactly about this, not the Bible part, but the part of the stories behind the stories, if you like. So what is the real meaning, and why, what does it mean, really going into it, and the psychology of it. So that's something perhaps we can talk about in the future as we go more in depth with it. But yeah, there are definitely strong moral lessons within fairy tales, strong life lessons within them that we can take on board and incorporate into our daily lives and our daily living. I haven't read the Bible. I've read bits and bobs of the Bible, so I can't make that
comparison.
I can't make that comparison. It
kind of struck me that way when I started rereading some old fairy tales, like some original fairy tales, not the ones that have been kind of Disney-fied. The original stuff. And a lot of them, a lot of people die in those fairy tales. Have you noticed? There's a lot of stuff going on in fairy tales, and there's a lot of kids being taught, very harsh lessons too.
They're not gentle, are they? I mean, when people like associate, fairies, la la la, very twee, sparkles and stuff. But yeah, there's some major heavy stuff going down, isn't there, in some of those fairy tales? Like really scary, really, really scary. And I suppose perhaps they came from a space of like really wanting to teach children a lesson. I don't know. But yeah, some of them are shockingly scary, and there is a lot of death and a lot of violence in them as well. There's also a lot of magic as well. You can find that within fairy tales. But I agree that they're quite heavy, actually, some of them, with very, very strong warnings as well.
I think back in 2006, I was in Switzerland, and I can't remember the town I was in, but I was just walking around taking some photos, and I was drawn to this fountain, and so I threw in like a gold coin and made a wish, and then I looked up, and there on top of the fountain in the middle is a gnome eating babies.
Right, okay. I'm trying to get my head around this one. So and
it's a fairy tale that was very prolific in this area, and they used to threaten their children with being eaten by the gnome if they didn't do things.
It's like the bogeyman, isn't it? Or people have these things that, I mean, it's shocking, really, isn't it? How people can do this to their children.
I actually stood back because I just thrown in my gold coin. I made a nice wish. And then I looked up, and there was this horrific thing in the middle. I wanted to get my money back and go.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps there are some gnomes that are partial to children. I don't know, but generally, I don't. I think a lot of gnomes are like vegetarians, actually, and a lot of fairy beings would be. I mean, they don't physically eat things as such, but it would be the essence of the thing. So I'm pretty sure that it's not a generalization, and that it is like a scare tactic to scare children. And it's such a shame. And this is another way that fairies have been and are still demonized. They're depicted in these ways as really bad and all this sort of stuff. But actually, that. Obviously, you get good and not so good in all manifestations. In humans, you get not good and not so good. And it's the same in the fairy realm. I mean, I haven't personally come across any gnomes that like to eat children, but it made me giggle when you said that, because I got, that's crazy. Somebody actually made a statue of that.
I'll see if I can find a picture of it, and I'll stick it in the area. Did you see the fairy photo I put in our chat?
Oh, no, I don't know if I did.
Okay. Down to the bottom of the screen, there should be a little chat, like a square box with some lines on it.
Oh, hang on. I've got, I'm a little bit of a technical fairy, but not, let me just see. I don't want to click something and then turn the whole thing off, because I don't understand this. There's lots of little boxes on my thing. I've just got a picture of the lovely gentleman that connected us. That's all that's on my screen at the moment. I can't get through to the chat box or anything.
You should, if you
hang on, there's a little thing. Hang on. Oh, okay. Where is that? I can see it now. Where is that from?
Well, that's one of the fairy photos I told you about earlier. So.
Oh wow.
So I just thought I'd pop one in for you, but I'll see if I can find this gnome and see if I can locate it so I can put it in there too, so you can have a nice look at that one. So I'll just type into Google gnome that eats babies and see what pops up.
Oh God.
So, and I'll put Switzerland in there too.
See, I think that's a myth. Some people say, "Oh, fairies! I don't believe in fairies." I don't believe that gnomes do that. I
have found it. It's the famous Swiss statue of the Swiss. Oh my God, the Swiss pedophile.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
We don't want to go there. We do not want to go there. No, I don't want to talk about that. That sounds awful.
Oh my God, I can't believe
I'm going to wave my magic wand now and make that all go away.
That's good. It said he was originally referred to as a gnome, but I think he wasn't actually a gnome. So
yeah. He is. I'll tell you now, 101%. That is not a gnome. That is not a fairy.
He's even got a sack of babies. This is awful. Just awful.
Yeah,
okay.
It is.
Like nicer things. Have you sprinkled the dust? Let's move on. So a lot of superstitions have their roots in the Fae. Would you mind sharing a couple with our readers? I thought, for example, like fairy trees, bad omens, etc. They seem to be the root of things. But again, it might just be scare tactics on parents. I don't know.
Okay, so I recently wrote an article about fairy trees, so we can start there. There are certain all trees will have you could call it a dryad, a tree spirit, a fairy guardian, a deva, whatever you want to call it. There will be an energy looking after that tree. Certain trees are more notorious and they're known as places where fairies would gather, and a few of those would be a hawthorn tree, for example, oak, ash. Specifically with the hawthorns, I'm not sure what it is. Perhaps it's the beautiful blossom, but they're drawn there and they're said to have their fairy rings around them. They'll join hands and they'll dance around these trees. So it is said that you should never cut a hawthorn tree, or you could incur the wrath of the Fae. Sometimes, like I've got a hawthorn tree, and sometimes the branches grow over, so you have to really, I would never just go up and snip a little twig or a branch off of a tree. I would always talk to the tree, maybe 2 or 3 days before, and say, look, you're growing in this place and I really need that part of you not to be there. May I cut this particular branch? I promise I'm not going to touch the rest of you, and just really explain what you're going to do. And that then gives the tree and the spirits of the tree, the fairies, the opportunity to withdraw the sap from that particular branch, to pull it back in to the rest of the tree so that you can safely cut it. But you should always ask permission, and this goes for any tree actually, but particularly where you do not want to annoy the fairies. I was going to use another word, but I'm not sure how many the age range of the listeners are. So you do not want to annoy the fairies, and so you would just be very respectful. Equally, there are certain places that you can use common sense. There will be certain places, certain areas in all over the world where you don't go there after dark, or you don't go to that place. It's the fairies don't want you to go there, and that could be like known as a fairy space where they gather, and maybe they don't want humans there, understandably. You know, sometimes it's like you don't always want visitors in your home, so why would they always want visitors in theirs? So those places could have deterrents. You know, maybe you might go there and you might trip up, or you might get a bramble caught in your clothing or something like this. Again, if you ask, go by common sense. I mean, if you feel like, whoa, this feels a bit creepy, I don't want to go there, then don't go there. I mean, it's kind of common sense, really. But some people aren't in tune with that side of things, so they'll go and they'll barge through this kind of sacred fairy space, and they will trip up, or they might get lost, or they might get brambles on their clothing, any of these kind of things, you know. So it's I don't feel there are any hard and fast rules regarding to this. I think a lot of it is down to pure common sense and trusting your own intuition and instinct on anything like this. So yeah, there are certain places that you wouldn't go to, but I don't think there's a list of them, so to speak. You might find something on Google perhaps, but it would all be very relevant to your local area where you are.
Exactly. Well, I know that I don't even pick a lemon from my lemon tree unless I ask. I learned that years ago. My grandmother taught me that.
That's so nice. That's you working. So you're kind of working in harmony with nature anyway when you do that. Because, and I'm the same, like if you're pulling some fruit off of a tree, you ask, you gently tug it, and if the tree wants to release that fruit, it will. But you know, if you do it in a sensitive way, you can feel rather than yank it off because it's not ready to release it. Again, a lot of these things are really common sense.
Like I use, I'm a big natural living person, so I use lemons to clean a lot of things. So I visit my tree a lot. So we actually have lots of conversations, my lemon tree and I
love that. And I love that you've got a lemon tree, of course, where we are. I couldn't grow lemons or any kind of citrus because I was going to say we don't have the weather, but the last few weeks it's settled down now. We've had crazy hot weather, like really, really hot. I literally couldn't leave the flat where I live because it's been so hot, but it's feeling a bit more autumnal now. But yeah, to have citrus fruits, oh, that's amazing. I love that.
I guess I've got a Tahitian lime next to it and a lemon, and I grow, my veggie patch it's got a lot more herbs than it has actual vegetables at the moment. I'm not very good at growing vegetables, but I'm an absolute herb grower. I can grow any herb. It's amazing.
That's interesting. I've got a little I grow like vegetables and things like kale and a lot of green kind of vegetables on my patio. I've got raised beds, and I had funny experience anyway. So I've kind of invested quite a lot into getting these raised beds and organic plants so that I can grow them, and then during this very hot spell that we've recently had, I noticed we've got also a buddleia. They call it like a butterfly bush. I don't know if you have them over there as well, but the butterflies, they love them, and the bees, and they're really insect friendly bushes, basically, with beautiful lilac flowers. Sometimes they have white flowers on them, and I noticed there were so many butterflies, and it's not far from where my veg is growing. Like, it's very close actually, because this buddleia bush has just grown so high. And I came back one day and I noticed this butterfly hovering around my kale plants and then it literally said to me, I'm gonna lay my eggs here and you're not gonna touch them. And I thought, cheeky, that's very cheeky. And lo and behold, when I went out the next day, there were eggs on the kale, butterfly eggs, and I knew what was coming next. And I was like, oh no, I can't destroy them. I couldn't do it because the butterfly had literally spoken to me. So I left them, and then obviously nature took its course. And then the next day or a couple of days after, I looked at my kale and it had been literally stripped back by all of these caterpillars, and I decided, well, kale's not so expensive, I can just buy that from the supermarket, and I just gave over all of my plants to the caterpillars and the butterflies, so to help them, because there's a bit of let's say a shortage, what's the word, they're becoming more rare because of all the pesticides and things that a lot of people use on their gardens. And butterflies, and they are like messengers from the fairy realm. Sometimes fairies can kind of shape shift into that, or use that the form of the butterfly so it could have been like a fairy talking to me in the body of the butterfly. Who knows? But they're very closely connected, because insects are an intrinsic part of nature, so it figures that there will be a connection with fairies there too.
No, that sounds, yeah, no, I agree with that. I don't agree with the kale, however. I find it, like, personally not on board with the whole kale situation. I've tried kale. I've tried it in a variety of, I've tried to smother it in things, and it still doesn't taste good. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In fact, I would have happily handed it over to the butterfly.
Well, the thing is, because I have a plant-based diet. I don't eat any flesh, any meat, or any fish. So kale is one of the most protein-filled vegetables, okay. And I do actually like the taste of it. So, and it's not for everybody. It's quite bitter, because I grow black kale, so it's even more bitter, and it's darker, and it's like, but I know that I'm getting so much goodness from it, so I actually really enjoy it. I just steam it with onions and tomatoes and things, and it's lovely. I really enjoy it. But yeah, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, so to speak. But yeah, great. Butterflies can have more kale. They'll be very happy.
I didn't think kale could get worse, and then you just told me there's a black version. I'm sorry. That's just you just took it to the next level. Hey, but if you love butterflies, I want to tell you about something that happened on my honeymoon with butterflies. We went to a little island called Badara Island, which is up in the Whitsundays, off Airlie Beach off the Queensland coast, and we were trekking. It was a very small island, and I was trekking from one side of the island to the other side, which is about an hour walk. And when you get to the very top, I got told by the maid or one of the people there in the resort said, when you get to the top of the island, you just have to kind of, stand still, hold your arms out, and close your eyes, and just wait. And I'm thinking, oh, this sounds like somebody's going to come and mug me or something. Anyway, I got up to the top, and I did exactly what they said. And within like a minute, I was surrounded with butterflies. And they just went round and round and round me for ages, and just completely enclosed. And it's apparently this island, Badara, is a habitat for a particular species, and they actually had a gentleman. I met him on the way back down after this happened, but it was the most amazing experience. So if you're into butterflies, you should go to Badara Island and check that out. It was
wow. That sounds like heaven to me, and the idea of something like that happening is so. I love it when just one butterfly lands on me. So let alone being surrounded by that many. That sounds like a very wonderful experience. I'd love that, and that's I think you have got like a connection to fairies. Listening to you and all your stories and the things that you're saying. So I think you'll find that you'll have more experiences after this show as well. I believe that.
Thanks for that. So, we have a reader question. So reader question 1. What is the most common sign that there's a fairy in the vicinity?
Oh, okay. The most common sign. Okay, so the first thing that's coming to mind is, do you have dandelion flowers over there. You know, they call them fairy clocks, where you blow them and all the little seeds. So that is a common sign. So if you see a little, I call them little fairy wishes, that's a sign that a fairy is nearby. Yes, you can say it's also a sign that the wind has blown and it's the dandelion spreading its seed, but that is a common sign of a fairy or the presence of fairies. Also, another common sign is a fairy ring, which is a circle growing in the grass of mushrooms or toadstools in a ring, in the shape of a ring. And they're said to sprout up after fairies have been dancing there in a circle. So that's a very common, quite a commonly known thing as well, certainly in the fairy community. So a fairy ring, fairy wishes. Also, and this is something, it's actually not commonly known at all, but it's certainly worth noting, is that most people have heard, you know, when an angel is nearby, you'll see a white feather very often. That's a sign of angels. That's a very definite thing. Well, fairies also leave feathers too, just to confuse things. But generally, the feathers that fairies will leave will be more kind of wild bird feathers. So, you know, it could be I don't know what birds you have over there, but like a jay feather, a kind of corvid type feather, or an owl or something like this. So fairies will work almost like birds that are associated with shamanism. So they will leave feathers. So that is a sign as well, because birds and fairies work together as well. Fairies will often hitch a ride on the back of a bird. So that's something to keep in mind. So there are a few little signs. Again, I don't want to say it's common because it might just be unique to me, but certain smells, a sweet smell that is not explainable. Like you're in the middle of nowhere, you get the smell of toffee apples, there's something going on. And that's something that's been my personal experience, as I explained earlier. But you might have something that's more personal to you. And then you do have to decipher, is that the smell of a somebody who's passed over, coming back to say hello, an ancestor? You know, you will know if you really tune in and are, you know, sensitive to your own feelings and intuition, you'll be able to know. So you can get certain smells. Again, that's not always common, but the common thing I would say is the fairy ring. That is the most common thing, a circle of toadstools or mushrooms that spring up after the fairies have been there. So that is a sign that fairies are close.
Do they have anything to do with truffles?
I would have thought that's all connected, isn't it? They grow in the same way. I don't know too much about truffles, but I know that they grow in the same way as toadstools and mushrooms, don't they? Do they have the spores?
Yes, I was just wondering if maybe that's a different type of fae that kind of, because you'd want to hook up with that one, wouldn't you? So.
Well, there's your starting point. There is your starting point. There will be fairies associated with truffles because it's something that grows as part of nature. So fairies are associated with everything that grows. Every single thing that grows, there will be a fairy energy working with it. Like the guardian of nature. They're guardians of nature, nature angels, earth angels. You can call them, label them whatever you want, but there will be a particular fairy whose sole job it is to protect that particular plant, truffle, mushroom, toadstool, whatever it is. So yeah, definitely.
So obviously some people are more perceptive to the fae than others. Would you refer to these people as being sensitive? Or do you have
generally, yes. Yeah, I would. I would say that a lot of the inverted comma fairy people that I have encountered do tend to be more sensitive in general life as well. So, yeah, I think fairies are very sensitive, so they will hone in on sensitive people because they're going to be more receptive to that connection. and they can sense on an energetic level. They can kind of read your aura. What sort of person are you? Are you the sort of person that will spray pesticides all over your garden? Are you the sort of person that will just throw litter everywhere? Or are you the sort of person that will take care of the environment and be sensitive to nature? And if you are sensitive to nature, then that is one step closer towards connecting to the fairies. And so, yeah, I would say sensitivity is high on the list of, you know, a requirement of connecting with fairies.
Now, there's some popular TV shows like Torchwood, and countless movies have cast the Fae as less than benevolent creatures.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Would you dispel this notion for our listeners, or can you not?
Okay, so obviously these are artistic interpretations and artistic expressions of fairies. Now, fairies are sometimes depicted as not so good, as not being not so nice. And in reality, there is that aspect. But it is up to you who you connect with and who you choose. Now, they can try and connect with you, but if you're not receptive to it or open to that, then you don't have to. So, for example, if you're going into a bar or something and there's a group of not very nice people, and then on the other side, there's a group of nice people, who do you want to connect with? So you're instinctively, unless you're a not very nice person, not you personally, but one is not a nice person, then maybe they might gravitate to the not so nice fairies. So it's whatever you resonate with on an energetic level. So fairies can be depicted in negative ways as well as positive ways. And I can't dispel that, because there are good and not so good fairies. I work with the fairies that I would refer to as good fairies, flower fairies, fairies that have the intention for the highest good of all.
Sorry, are you still there?
I am, yeah. There's some weird noises going on, though.
Yeah, I know. Is that you, Sheila?
No, Sharon, nothing here.
Oh,
I can hear the noises, though.
Okay, so
that's interesting. It might be a goblin or something. I don't know.
Maybe mute and unmute. Sometimes that helps.
Okay, let's give it a go. Now I've got deep breathing. How about you guys?
Yeah, pretty much same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't really hear anything now. Is Bobby there, or?
I think he's out for a test. He's yes, I wonder if he's left the mic in somebody else's hands. We'll press on. So the Fae are part of Celtic mythology, and due to this, often ignored and dismissed as the whimsy of imaginative individuals. Have you had Fae contact or interviewed or met someone that has? And would you mind sharing their encounter with us? Have you, obviously in the magazine, you've probably interviewed people that have had contact at some point?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that contact me do so in confidence, because they're not ready to, let people know about what their experience has been. But I hear so many tales of people's personal experience with fairies, and sometimes they're not even like what I would call fairy people. Like they're just normal people, and they're like, I don't want my family to know about this, it's just going to make me look weird, and I want to follow you on Facebook, but I can't like your page because they'll know that I like a fairy person, and so there's still a bit of reservation about this, and quite a lot of people are still like this. So I feel like my role in some small way is to say, hey, it's okay to talk about fairies, it's okay to believe in them, it's okay to work with them, and yeah, some people might think I'm silly or flighty, but you know what, I don't care. I really don't care what other people think. So I think for anybody listening that does have a connection with fairies and they're too kind of, you know, apprehensive to share it, you can't share it with everybody, because you kind of know, again, instinctively, that it's okay or it's not okay to talk to somebody about something, and that you normally get a feeling for that over time. Like sometimes you can talk to people about your experiences and you know they're just going to poo-poo it, then they're not interested, they're just going to come back at you with a kind of super scientific mind or want an explanation for everything. And basically you don't have to prove your experience to anybody. It's an experience that you are having, and you do not have to justify or prove it to anybody. So never feel that you have to. That's just a general thing for everybody. Oh gosh, where do I start really? That I'm trying to think of a...
Has one ever just stood out to you as you know, that you've had to, even days later, that like I've had a few people tell me about their experiences with ETs, and you know, there's always that one person who, you know, a couple of days later you're still remembering what happened to them. So
yeah,
that
God, honestly, you wouldn't believe how many I've been told. There was one recently. Oh, it involves a gnome.
No,
it involves a gnome, yeah. And so they had an experience with a gnome, and they hadn't had an experience with a gnome before. They didn't really know what it was, but it was something that something about a gnome was they met the gnome in their garden, and then I think they brought some flowers into the house, and then the next thing they could sense this presence in the house. And I think they had somebody come in who was like a dowser or something, and they dowsed, and they worked out that the gnome had actually come into the house and was actually getting quite protective over the house of this person once they were inside. So the idea was then to kind of coax it outside, and they did this by leaving flowers at intermittent points over a period of time. So they would leave flowers like at the top of the stairs. I think the gnome was in the airing cupboard or something like this. It found it quite comfy and warm in there. So, you know, where you put your clothes and the boiler is and everything. So it had kind of taken up residence in there, and they just had to get it back out again. So they put flowers outside the door, and then they put it at the top of the stairs, and then they put the flowers at the bottom of the stairs, and then by the door. And then eventually it went back outside to its natural habitat. So I thought that was quite fascinating as well. I know that you can get housebound fairies. In fact, there are, I think they're called brownies. You might have different names for them, and they're actually house fairies, and they'll come and they live in the home, usually a family home, and they're often quite helpful, kindly creatures. So, and sometimes they can be a little bit mischievous, like they might hide your keys and stuff like this. But sometimes when fairies do that, it is only because they want your attention. So they're trying to reach out to you. They're trying to get your attention. They want to be recognised, like we all do. You know, in as a human, you want to be recognised, you want to be acknowledged, and it's the same for them. It's more frustrating for them because they don't have a physical body, so they have to use other means, like magical means, to grab our attention. And very often, you know, it's not, you think, oh, I've just mislaid my keys, but when you know you put your keys down somewhere and then the next day they're not there and there's no one else in the home, then you think, what is going on? Of course, you can put this down to other types of presence, like spirits, ghosts, but as you say, everything ultimately is coming from this one energy, I suppose, clothed in different guises.
Yes. Hey, we've got a second reader question. Fairies are often referred to as fallen angels. I'd never heard that before. Why do you think this is?
It initially, I've heard it a couple of times, but usually it comes from a religious place, and again it stems back to the church kind of demonizing fairies, so they kind of cast them as a bad thing. That's all really. Fairies are not fallen angels. That's a very, very different thing. Fairies are guardians of the planet. They're guardians of the environment. They protect everything that grows. They nurture life. They are good beings in general, and sometimes they're misunderstood and misinterpreted. So when people say if they have like a not so good experience with a fairy, perhaps they need to look at themselves first, because a fairy will trip you up if you're the sort of person that doesn't respect the environment. It's like that's their job, that's their role, is as guardians of the environment, and that's everything that grows. That's the oceans as well, that's the air, that's everything, all part of the planet, everything, the elements, the elementals. That's why they're often referred to as elementals as well. They are not fallen angels.
I actually think I've got a picture of elementals here in Australia I should share with you.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when we do sky watches, we get more activity around us on the ground, because we usually do them in Aboriginal sacred spaces over here.
Yeah.
And I do some sky watches, and there's nothing going on in the sky, but surrounding us is a lot of activity. And so I've actually got a photo from, I think it was 2014. Yeah, probably 2014, of some elementals in the bush, and some very strange lights coming down, like a rainbow light.
Oh wow, that's so nice. See, I always associate the rainbow as, where was it? Was it near any water? Was there any water there or not?
Oh, I'm just trying to remember.
Oh, usually there has to be some water if there's a rainbow, doesn't there? Somewhere, or some elements of water, because a rainbow is, especially the low rainbows. I don't mean the huge rainbows in the sky, but the low rainbows, and are like an expression, a manifestation, a physical manifestation of water fairies, of water spirits, of water sprites, whatever you want to call them, water elementals, and they can manifest as a rainbow, as a low rainbow. So often when you see that, that's another sign, reverting back to a former question, that you can have rainbow. A common sign of a fairy can also be a low rainbow, like maybe in a waterfall or something like that.
Well, it was at the base of a mountain. That's where we were doing it. So potentially there could have been a water source there. But it was quite a thick bushland around the spot. So I can go and check it out on a map. So I'll see if I can post the picture for you to have a look at. It was quite defined, like column of light coming straight down.
Oh wow! That sounds amazing.
It looks like somebody's posted a question in the chat. Are there Monsanto fairies? Isn't Monsanto a poison?
I think it's a little tongue-in-cheek question.
Yes,
possibly. But
fertilizer people, isn't it?
You know what? I think the fairies would run as far away from Monsanto.
Yeah,
that's all I'm gonna say.
I discovered my husband still had some in the shed a couple of months ago, and I got most upset with him. And but he says, so I haven't checked to see if he's still buying it.
Get rid of that.
I know.
My advice.
Unfortunately, your husband or your partner Karen seems to be more in sync with you. My husband, I call him the Muggle, so he's not. he doesn't really he doesn't really listen to me on a lot of things like that. He listens to me on other areas, but
the thing is, like, my partner is very supportive. He's also helps to keep me grounded, because especially when you work with fairies or anything like not of this world, of our realm, shall we say, because fairies are of this world. They're just in a parallel dimension on this planet with us. But when you're working with these different energies and different beings, you can get a bit, well, most people have heard the terms airy fairy, away with the fairies, that sort of thing. It can be it can make you a little bit scatty, for want of a better word. So having a partner that is supportive yet quite very grounded in this human world as well is really helpful for me, because he helps me to ground a lot of the ideas that I have and a lot of the inspirations that come to me from the fairies on a very practical level. So that's quite helpful. So he might not have the same kind of experiences as me, but he has had some experiences. But he is very supportive, which is great, because I know that not everybody is, but having a partner that's not exactly the same as you can be quite helpful and quite grounding. So I'll always find the positive in everything. So I'm sure your partner is lovely.
Yes, he's the yin to my yang. Is that what they say?
Yeah. I love that.
So I'm just trying to locate it for you. Because it was such a beautiful shot, and like it's in the one of the issues of the magazine as well. So they've all gone in at some time, but this particular one was just very pretty, I thought. And it had a friend of mine in it too. He was investigating the bush, and then it appeared right next to him. So
wow. I can relate. When you describe that, I can totally relate to that, because there was a group of friends and we're just having like a little day out, and we decided to go exploring, and we found this very, very old graveyard, a church and graveyard that was not far from Glastonbury in the UK, in Somerset. And I can't remember what the name of it was. It's Dumpton Comden or Compton Dumden, or so. It was a crazy name actually, but it had, I think it was supposed to be like, I don't know if it was the UK's oldest yew tree or the world's oldest yew tree. I don't know. I probably got that wrong, but it was one of the oldest yew trees. And everyone was taking pictures, and in this selfie world that we now live in. And I had a picture taken. And when it came out, there was just like a shaft of life. It was almost like, on Star Trek, and they like beam me up, Scotty, and they have those teleporters. It was like that, and I was literally standing in it. So that reminds me of what you're describing, of that kind of shaft, that portal of light that's coming down really strongly. It's such a powerful thing.
Yeah, it was. You don't realise it's on. We didn't actually notice it with our eyes. It wasn't until I got home later and I actually checked the camera.
Yeah.
That I captured it. So
yeah, that's exactly the same. What happened to me? Exactly the same. So
it had been a bit of a boring night, and then I realised, oh my God, look what I got. Which happens a lot. So,
wow.
I'll keep looking. Now, fairy places are also referred to as no-go zones for humans. In fact, most humans in the know believe that they will be cursed if they set foot on fey ground. Is that true?
I don't know. It sounds to me like another one of these kind of scaremongery anti-fairy things. I think fairies would have the ability and power to curse if they wished, the same as humans. However, again, referring back to what we were talking about earlier, there are some places that it's probably better that humans don't go to. And if that is a sacred or hallowed space for the Fae, then it's something that you would feel, you can feel, I mean, you'd have to be pretty thick-skinned and closed not to be able to feel when you're going somewhere if you're energetically welcome in that space. And if you have any doubt, do nout. That's I think it's a Yorkshire saying, I don't know, but I really like it. If in doubt, do nout, like don't do anything. So don't proceed. If you have a feeling, it's about getting in touch with your own intuition, your own instincts, and feeling like, you know what, this doesn't feel right to me. You might get like your hackles go up or whatever sign that you get. You know if something feels good or feels right. I mean, it takes quite a thick-skinned person not to have to be aware of those things. So if you go somewhere, unless, you know, if there's local legend about it or something, then read up on it. But equally, that can be in direct relation to somebody who has been really horrible, in the sense of been doing nasty things to nature or maybe animals or whatever it is. And so, yeah, the fairies are going to be like, no, stay away. You're not welcome here. The same way somebody could knock on your door and you might think, I don't want you in my home. No, go away. You know, it's the same, but translated into kind of fairyland or the fairy realm, if you like. So, yes, there are places that it would be advisable for humans not to go. I don't know if there's a list. I think that would be down to local knowledge and local legend, if you like, local folklore, local tales, old wives' tales, whatever you want to call it. But equally, just because it's not been right for somebody to not go there in the past doesn't mean that it's not right for you to go there. And the best way is to kind of suck it and see, if you know what I mean. So just go there. If it feels good, continue. And if it doesn't, then go back. Always ask permission. You know, you can ask in your mind, you can ask with pure intention from your heart, you know, because fairies will feel your intention regardless of the words that are coming out of your mouth. They will feel your intention. So if you're going there in a kind of innocent, open way, obviously I would always recommend that people use protection in any type of spiritual work. I think that's essential. The same way you're going into a club, you've never been there before, you take a mate with you to watch your back. You've got each other's backs. It's the same. So call in your spirit guide, your angel, whatever you or whoever you work with, so that you've always got some kind of spiritual psychic protection. I think that's essential, especially when working in any way with fairies, because in fairyland everything is back to front, upside down, in between, betwixt and between. There are no real rules, so it can be easy to get lost in fairyland, to literally go away with the fae. So it's important to stay grounded, very, very important to stay grounded, and very, very important to have some kind of spiritual protection, psychic protection, which can be really simple as visualizing a golden cloak, pulling the hood over your head and setting the intention that you are safe, protected and loved at all times. It can be as simple as that. So that would always be my advice. So yeah, go in and go wherever you feel drawn, and if it doesn't feel right, don't go in there. Common sense, really.
Yes, I agree. So what inspired you to manifest the Fairies and Enchantment magazine? What was the impetus? Did you have a dream, or is it something that you just have always wanted to do?
Well, no, it wasn't something I always wanted to do. It was born out of this, when I explained earlier about the first fairy event that I did. I mean, I've been kind of tinkering with the fairies, if that makes sense, since I think about 2003. I did a fairy, angel and healing fair. So angels were, you know, accepted. They're more commonly accepted because they tie in with religion as well. So I feel like people are more open to the angelic. well, I wanted to bring in the fairies, and I did this in 2003, and I did like a mind, body, spirit event, but it was called the Fairy, Angel and Healing Fair. And I think at that point there was only like one person there with a fairy stall. Everything else was angels and healing. But I felt it was really important to open up that space for the fairy energy, even if there was only one person there representing that. And it kind of grew from there. And then, as I said, when I did this event in 2006 and it sold out and all these fairy people literally come out of the woodwork. And then the following year I did the first fairy festival in 2007. And that was also the year that OeC Magazine was born, Fairies and Enchantment. And the reason was because I felt there was a need for it. Here was a community of fairy lovers, of people that identified with fairies. And I thought, I want to create a publication for them. And it was just like a little fun thing, really. I mean, fortunately, I'd come from a kind of journalistic background. So I had this experience. I used to work for the BBC. I've kind of done this stuff. And I walked away from that because I knew that wasn't my heart's work. That wasn't my life's path any longer. But I was left with all these skills, like these amazing skills. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to write about the news, negative news, but I do want to write about fairies. And I do feel that there is a need. It felt like there was a gap. And how do we kind of keep the fairy community connected when we're not all together at an event, because fairy people are all over the world. So I created Fae, and initially it was just for fun. It was just, you know, if I was going to buy a magazine, what sort of magazine would I want to buy? It's the same as when I created the events. What type of event would I want to go to? And that's what I created. So most things that I do, in fact, pretty much everything that I do stems from, would I buy that? Would I go there? Would I read that? And that's where it comes from. So I created a magazine that I would want to read, a fairy lifestyle magazine that included folklore, fashion, events, news, books, everything, and that was representing, and that still does represent, the worldwide fairy community. Initially it was just I did it with the UK in mind, and it wasn't long after that I was contacted by a distributor in America, and in fact I ignored the first couple of emails because I thought it was somebody winding me up. Like, we want to sign Fae, we want to take Fae to the USA. And I thought, well, why would they want to? It's just a little fairy magazine. Why would they want to do that? And then they phoned me up and said, have you been getting our emails? And I'm like, oh, is this real? And they said, yeah, we want to distribute Fae in the US.